So now, chapter 4 of Gongchik. Remember that chapter 3, 4, and 5 are the chapters on the three vows, right? The 3 levels, 3 sets of trainings. The individual liberation is the last chapter. Now is the training of the bodhisattvas. And then chapter 5 is about Vajrayana, secret mantra. So each of these chapters are going to address, right, those issues, those issues that pertains to particularly sort of individual liberation vow training, bodhisattva vow training, and the Vajrayana secret mantra, tantric samaya, and issues related to Vajrayana practice. You'll see that, it's not just about the vows, like, it's not a discussion about, here are the vows, so they assume you already know, right? So that's the thing, yeah? You have to learn elsewhere, right? What are the details of those vows? Here, it's matters of understanding related to these 3 areas are going to be discussed in order. So now, the training of the bodhisattvas. So compassion is claimed by many to be the resolve for awakening, since the great vehicle is made distinctive by compassion. Compassion is claimed by many people to be the resolve for awakening, since the great vehicle is made distinctive by compassion. So here Gilbert Rinpoche will clarify and say, compassion and the resolve for awakening are different. This, I think, many of you have heard me say it again and again during different programs, different things, that compassion and bodhicitta, karuna and bodhicitta are 2 different things. Not only the words are obviously different, but the areas covered by the term bodhicitta and the scope covered by the word karuna, they are different, and that we should see the difference. We call compassion the tormented thought. Tormented, meaning uncomfortable, actually. Yeah. The tormented thought of natural compassionate love for other disabled beings, and so on. So other disabled beings, disabled, you can think of it as even like in relation to you, meaning they are less able than you are. And what are we talking about here? Obviously, we're not talking about wealth. Well, obviously, we're not talking about might, strength. Obviously, we're not talking about beauty. Obviously, we're not talking about prestige and position in society. What are we talking about? We're talking about having or not having dharma, having or not having interest in dharma, having or not having ability to practice dharma. So in that sense, it's saying, when you understand, and put things into perspective, you should see how fortunate you are. And so how able you are compared to those who, without choice, without ability, without realistic options, they suffer, and they suffer unknowingly and meaninglessly. Obviously now, like we feel compassion for others because of other reasons too, For sure, you see someone hungry, you see someone, homeless, you see someone unjustly, treated, then compassion arises. Right, that's quite natural. It arises like that. But it's also here pointing out that when that arises, you should actually look more deeply, not just on the surface, and understand that even more tragic is that the Dharma is not in their lives. And the Dharma here, okay, I don't want you to kind of make this very narrow and think, oh, they don't know the Gongchik or they don't know the Buddha Dharma. And I'm not even talking, right? Here we're not even talking about Dharma in that systematic way. Although, yes, of course, if you have it, in this form, it's really great. But it's talking about, like at the most root level, they don't even know, right, how suffering arises. What is the nature of suffering? And then how suffering is optional, how suffering can be overcome, how conditions can change and will change. Not knowing that, it's true suffering when we don't know that, when we forget that. So in those terms, even someone who quote unquote is Buddhist, even someone who is a Buddhist scholar might not know that, might not remember that. And so then they too are objects of our compassion. Yeah. So anyway, Chodra first defines, this is what compassion is. Then the resolve for awakening arises from the cause that is the two immeasurable great compassions. Moreover, awakening signifies the purification of the consciousness and the realization of gnosis. Awakening, the Tibetan is Jang and Chup. So you see the contraction here, Jangwa and Chuppa. Jangwa, Chuppa, Jangchup. Jangchup is awakening. So the Jang is purification of the mind, the consciousness, our thoughts, our feelings, and realization of primordial wisdom, gnosis. Changwa Chuppa Changchup. So that is what Changchup. Why discussion of this? Because the awakening mind, bodhicitta. And so then he elaborates. The reason is the following. The consciousness that is to be purified on the occasion of the first complete purification is the five senses. So the consciousness is associated with the five senses. On the second occasion, meaning a more subtle purification, is the sixth sense, the intellect, namely mind. And on the third occasion, even more subtle, the afflicted mind. And then even more subtle, so that's the afflicted mind is sometimes called the seventh consciousness. So there's the five sense consciousness, then there's intellect, mind, the sixth sense consciousness. Then there's the afflicted mind, the notion of I. Is the fourth level of the complete purification. And then the aspect of ripening the basic consciousness is the fourth. The third is the afflicted. The fourth is the aspect of ripening of the basic consciousness. And that is the sometimes called the alaya, the ground, the basic. And so the fifth, and on the fifth, the aspect of the seat of the basic consciousness. So now the alaya is like divided into two parts. The more general, ripening of the basic consciousness, and then the seed of the basic consciousness. Concerning what one must realize, primordial wisdom or gnosis, it is suitable to divide into two, namely path and result. On the occasion of training, the gnosis of the path is an approximation, And on the occasion of no more training, it is actual. So these are the two aspects of this primordial wisdom. Meaning, like on the path, right? All the trainings of wisdom that we're talking about, they approximate the reality. They approximate the real primordial wisdom. That it is not until you are at the level of Buddha where the primordial wisdoms are actual. Prior to that, while on the path, it's an approximation. The gnosis of the result is finally the five gnosis, right? The five primordial wisdoms, right? Such as the primordial wisdom of Dharmadhatu, the mirror-like primordial wisdom, the primordial wisdom of sameness or equality, the discriminating or the discerning primordial wisdom, and the all-accomplishing primordial wisdom. Those are the five related to the five Buddha families. Compassion, on the other hand, is twofold. Focusing on the individual being and on the Dharma. The Mahayana Sutra Lankara says, the first is thinking continuously about benefiting beings. The second is focusing on aspiring for the Dharma, and similarly on seeking its gnosis. So here the definition of these two immeasurable great compassion, in fact, includes a wisdom aspect. So the first is the thinking continuously about benefiting beings, and the second is aspiring on knowledge, Dharma. What are they like, the individual beings who are the object of the compassion that focuses on individual beings? Mahayana Sutta Lankara says, be compassionate towards sentient beings who are dominated by powerful enemies, are oppressed by suffering, obscured by darkness, have entered a path that is difficult to traverse, to travel on, are completely bound by the great fetters, are attached to the food that is mixed with poison, have lost the path, are sidetracked and powerless. So it says, we should really see this, when we see this, when we see that, all beings are dominated by these powerful enemies. And that's when we don't have you see, ordinary compassion, ordinary kind of confused compassion necessarily have to set a line between us and them, the good guys and the bad guys. That's how ordinary compassion works, So, ordinarily speaking, for people like activists, for good causes, right? Then it's always like we need an enemy, Shantideva says, like, he says, okay, let's say, yes, we need enemies, yeah? Then let's keep asking the question, who are the real enemies? Well, then you say, oh, those people who oppress others, the landowners, the 1%, the whatever, right? The government. Then it's like, okay, who are these? Where are they? So Shantideva, right, through Bodhicitta Avatara, brings it all the way back to they are afflictive emotions. Another approach is from the Lojong approach. In the Lojong teachings, it says, actually, these enemies, they are the real benefactors for us. It's because of them that we're going to wake up. So there are several ways, to look at, this notion of like enemies. But bottom line is, our confused way of being compassionate, of being loving, is it's very much, constructed on this dualism between me and not me, And now maybe like, oh, you're more compassionate, so you don't just think about me, but you still think about us and them. So like eat the rich, because the rich have been eating the poor for so long. Now we need to eat the rich, so to say, that expression, eat the rich, because the rich has been eating the poor for so long. But here it's saying, no, are you able to see that, everybody is quite helpless in this situation? Moreover, in the same vein, be affectionate to the poor, be affectionate to the undisciplined, be affectionate to the quarrelsome, be affectionate to the mindless, have compassion for those who are in thrall to sense objects, and have compassion for those who are attached to wrong views. Again, quoting from the Mahayana Sutra Lankara. Compassionate affection for such beings is focusing on the individual being, thinking about the suffering consisting of those beings' confusion regarding the practice and abandonments of virtues and evil actions is focusing on the Dharma. So even when it says focusing on the Dharma, right, it's related to these beings, which is not only do you see their suffering, but you see the way in which suffering has arisen for these beings. Thinking about the suffering consisting of those beings' confusion, the suffering that constitute those beings' confusion regarding them not knowing or not being able to practice virtue and abandon non-virtue, is the kind of compassion that is focused on the Dharma. Being motivated by this twofold compassion, one possesses the vast cultivation of the resolve to achieve the benefit of others, the root of the resolve for awakening. So now, this is what bodhicitta is. Often another way of talking about bodhicitta, we say love and compassion, being pushed by that to make you resolve to become Buddha, that is bodhicitta. Here, it's explained slightly different, but basically no contradiction in meaning. Here, it's squarely looking at the issue of compassion and say, so you need these twofold compassion. One, which quite naturally arises when you see people suffering and you feel bad for that. And you want them to be free from suffering. That quite naturally arises. But that itself, not enough. It needs to have the second part, which is the kind of compassion that also recognizes that the reason why we are all in this stuck here is because of not knowing what are the causes of suffering and what are the causes of happiness. So Mahayana Sutra Lankara says, concerning its stages, the resolve is fourfold, namely aspiration, pure altruistic thought, maturations that are different from that, and similarly the relinquishment of veils. The root is held to be compassion. The actual cause for the arising of the resolve for awakening is fourfold, which is to take the special refuge, to train the mind in the four immeasurables. 3, to gather the accumulation of merit in vast measures, and to generate the notion of the Guru as the actual Buddha, which is the chief cause. And so here, how to give rise to this bodhicitta? It is taught that there are 4 things that we have to bring together to take the special refuge. What are they referring to here? It's the Buddha Dharma Sangha for sure. But here more specifically, it says when we say Sangha, it needs to be focused on 8th level bodhisattvas and above. It's not saying that less than that, they are not worthy of our respect. Yeah? Don't misunderstand this, Oh, 7th-level bodhisattva. I'm not going to take refuge in you. Shravaka arhats. I'm not going to take refuge in you. It's not saying that, It's saying that this commitment is so great, that unless they are 8th level bodhisattvas and above, it's not enough. That there are such subtle levels of confusion and obstacles that needs to be removed, that even 7th level bodhisattvas have no power to do that. That at least they have to be 8th level, 8th bhumi bodhisattvas. That's the special refuge. To train the mind in the 4 immeasurables. So you know the 4 immeasurables. So you have to train that. To gather the accumulation of merit in vast measures. So using the mind and using whatever resources that we have to generate merit, sonam. I shared a video of the mandala offering is a method. So those resources, grains, semi-precious stones, and they say you add, these things. So you see a group of probably neighborhood, friends gathering at someone's house. This is a good example of what older Tibetan people do. They gather together and do Dharma practice. So they're doing mandala offering. Hold that, then dismantle everything. Then again, do, and then dismantle, and then again, they're just sitting around someone's living room. That's where they're seated. Tibetan living rooms around the corners. There are these couches, sofa couches / beds. Then kind of coffee table in the middle. So they're just sitting around the living room and singing and chanting this mandala offering. So that is one of the ways. Then 4, to generate the notion of the Guru as the actual Buddha, which is the chief cause. Concerning this, the Abhisamaya says, paying respect to the Buddhas and thereby bringing forth the root of virtue, one is guarded by the spiritual teacher. Such a person is the vessel for hearing the teaching. Meaning someone who has respect for the Buddhas and is guarded, protected by their Guru, this person is a proper vessel for hearing the teachings. So these four, the actual cause for the arising, which has these 4 aspects to it, that practice is in the 5-fold Mahamudra practice, that is longer, more expansive. Our text is very short, right? What we just did this morning, concise, right? But in longer ones, they, under the section for bodhicitta, they have these 4. So first you visualize Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front, surrounded by the whole bodhicitta refuge field, all the 8th level bodhisattvas and above. Then you take refuge in this. It's called the Mahayana Sangha, the Mahayana field of refuge. Then you do the recitation for and meditate on the 4 immeasurables. Then you do offerings. And then you see this Buddha Shakyamuni and your Guru as inseparable and receive their blessings. And then on the basis of that, then you do the bodhicitta prayer. The bodhicitta prayer is in your opening, in one of them, the famous one from Shantideva is in the opening and dedication prayer PDF. And the one that says, Changchut Nimpo Chigi Bar Sanjin Nama Kyapsuji. Just FYI, for your information, is that prayer in page 4, around there, Until I attain the heart of awakening, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas develop awakening mind and progress on the bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all wandering beings, give rise to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. So that's like the main recitation. And keep, saying that, in letting that, sink into our hearts and into our hearts, Yeah, so that would be in the longer practice of the first of the Fivefold Path. Would be these 4 aspects of the cause for awakening of body heart, of body mind. So, therefore, compassion is a cause for cultivating the resolve for awakening, but it is not the actual resolve itself. And so now the relationship between compassion, after defining carefully what compassion is, because the word compassion can mean so many things. Especially in the non-Buddhist context, there's all sorts of meanings for compassion. So we often, have other things going on, Often is, at best, is the first type, which is like the not being able to control. You see suffering, you cannot bear it, That's the natural, right? Nobody taught you that. The natural compassion often is that, yeah? And then often that kind of compassion leads to more suffering. When we don't know, no understanding of why we're feeling that way. And no understanding to why people suffer, why others suffer, why we suffer, So then Chodra says, when we say compassion here, 2, compassion for the individual being, and compassion that is informed by Dharma. When these 2 types of compassion are there, then they become, right, a cause for bodhicitta to arise, for relative bodhicitta to arise. Earlier, 10 non-Buddhists went to the snow mountain, Kailash, and as a result of the icy wind, 9 died. To test the remaining one, Indra manifested a week-old dog on top of a silken throne endowed with many layers of cushions and sheltered from the cold wind. Manifesting himself as a person, Indra said to the non-Buddhists, "Get rid of the dog and sit on the throne, and you will not die." Yeah? The non-Buddhist replied, "To die from the strong wind causes no problems for me. But this is not the case in pushing away the dog." Thus, through such stories, it is shown that non-Buddhists too have such compassion. Moreover, for Buddhists too, it is true that the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas also have great compassion. But since they do not cultivate the resolve to benefit others, it is taught that they must cultivate the resolve again in the Mahayana. So according to the Mahayana, even though the great Arhats and the Pratyeka Buddhas, and the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas have great compassion, of course they have compassion, but they do not actively cultivate the resolve to become Buddhas. So according to the Mahayana perspective, even these great beings eventually have to give rise to bodhicitta in order to achieve true freedom, true liberation. Maitreya Natha says, the cultivation of the resolve is the wish to attain completely perfect awakening for the sake of others. And so that is the most succinct definition of what is bodhicitta. And here, relative bodhicitta, okay? What is this relative bodhicitta? is the wish to attain completely perfect awakening for the sake of others. Therefore, compassion commonly exists for non-Buddhists, Buddhists, Shravakas, and Mahayana people alike. All beings. Whether you're not, you don't even need to be Buddhist, because it's that natural. Elsewhere we learn, right, that natural discomfort, right, with suffering is related to what? Because we all what? Because we all what?
Have Buddha nature.
Have Buddha nature. Yeah. So that's universal. Yeah. The resolve for awakening is the root of the Mahayana path. Hence, compassion is the cause of the resolve for awakening, but it is not the actual resolve itself. For like a sprout and a fruit, the one arises from the other. Yeah, so the notes in 4.1, Dorje Sherab says people confuse compassion with the resolve for awakening, because compassion is said to be the source of all benefit and happiness for oneself and others, which is true. Buddha said that. Yeah, Buddha said that. To support such a view, people quote Saraha, for example. Dorje Sherab says, yeah, you can see in Saraha, one of the great Mahasiddhas, he says, whoever enters into emptiness separated from compassion will not find the supreme path. So here Saraha is saying, even if you have understanding of emptiness, if compassion is not there, you will not achieve the goal. And Gampopa said, I firmly grab hold of this compassion, which is without attachment to the benefit of others, as the supreme means. Here, this translation, I'm a little confused, which is without attachment to the benefit of others, as the supreme means. I don't know if there's some translation or, like a word missing, But you get the point, yeah? It's saying that Gampopa, after he sees compassion, and that is the supreme means, that is the method, compassion. And likewise, even you can quote Jigten Sungön. For example, he says, all my disciples ought to seize the stream of emptiness compassion. All former lords arose from that, emptiness compassion. Now, but although he values compassion very highly, Jigten Sungön still maintains that compassion and the resolve for awakening are different. So then after that, there's a discussion of the 5 paths. The path of preparation, path of seeing, path of practice, path of no more learning. And then the practice, non-meditation, and no more learning. These are the 5 paths. So here, go to the next part. I don't think we need to go through. This is just matching, different aspects of the 4 yogas of Mahamudra with the 5 paths. Something else is going on. It's not really talking about the main point here. I think we'll just get distracted and like get all confused there. But if you look at, apart from compassion, which is the root resolve, Choki Drakpa mentions 4 general factors that give rise to the resolve for awakening. which is taking the special refuge, training the mind in four immeasurables, gathering merit, then generating the notion of the Guru as actual Buddha. The Dorshema specifies that there are four causes for arising of the preliminary resolve, the resolve to become Buddha. The second cause, the four immeasurables, includes the elements of immeasurable compassion. Thus, since compassion is among the causes, the resolve is a result. Therefore, they cannot be the same. In addition, Dorje Sherab continues, compassion and the resolve have different functions, namely to separate beings from suffering and to establish them in Buddhahood, respectively. Yeah. So compassion is to separate beings from suffering. To establish them in Buddhahood is ultimate, separating them from the problem. That is bodhicitta. They have different focus, that is sentient beings and Buddhahood. In the Rinjangma, the teaching of the four causes is said to go back to Atisha. So Rinjangma says, these four causes, Atisha taught this, that these are the four parts, four elements that you can train in order to make your bodhicitta more and more refined, more and more authentic. Taking special refuge, training in the four immeasurables, gathering merit, and continuing to develop the view that the Guru is Buddha. In the end, like that is the most kind of like important function of Guru practice. Yeah. Not to be mistaken with, related to, just as this discussion, compassion and bodhicitta are different, but they are. Bodhicitta depends on compassion, right? Likewise, the Guru that you adopt as your starting point of seeing everyone as Buddha is different from learning the Dharma from others, from teachers. Yeah, it's different, but of course, just like compassion is the root of bodhicitta, learning the Dharma from teachers is also the root, right, of seeing the teacher as Buddha. And seeing the teacher as Buddha is the special method to seeing all beings as Buddha. Yeah. So this is sort of a tangent. Yeah. There's the mention of Mahayana Sutra Lankara. Yeah. Or quotes from Mahayana Sutra Lankara. So the Mahayana Sutra Lankara is an important text in Indian Buddhism, and then particularly in the way that Tibetan Buddhists develop a training program. In the training program that developed over the centuries in Tibet, Mahayana Sutra Lankara is one of the main texts that is emphasized. In fact, formal studies in Tibet is grounded in what is Sutrayana texts. Vajrayana texts never really constituted a formal study program. So in the programs that train like geishas in the Gelugpa tradition, and in the programs that train Khenpos in the Kagyu Sakya Nyingma tradition, right? Generally, most of the time is not spent studying Vajrayana. In fact, Vajrayana texts and Vajrayana topics are taught as ancillary, as postgraduate studies. The main body of the studies is anchored on the great sutras and particularly commentaries on the sutras composed by the Indian masters. So I want to recommend, if you want to learn not learn, but have some understanding, have some appreciation, right, of the broader context for a lot of what we're talking about. Again, if you go to the Wisdom podcast, there are all different ways to get to these podcasts. If you go to the Wisdom podcast, and this is the podcast put out by Wisdom Publications in Boston. Last time I mentioned, the interview that was done with Shechen Rabjam Rinpoche that I thought was very heartfelt. It really gave me a sense of who Shechen Rabjam Rinpoche's teacher, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, a very important Lama for modern times. In fact, I can say that I like our own holiness looks to Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche as one of his main teachers. Great Nyingma Lama, but truly kind of impartial in his attitude to all the different lineages. But of course, his main focus was teaching and ensuring the longevity of the Nyingma traditions, of which there are lots and lots of different traditions within Nyingma. But he, at heart, was impartial. So he supported all the younger lamas that needed to be supported in their preserving of their traditions. So he helped, our holiness. So I shared with you, that I listened to the interview with his grandson, Shechen Rabjam, and you can see sort of, or I felt, that when he was talking about his grandfather and how giving and accepting his grandfather was, that is really kind of like embodying, bodhicitta. And you can see also how Shechen Rabjam himself embodies those qualities. Anyway, another really good interview in that podcast. Look for an interview with, if you look for this word, I think you'll find it. An interview that was done with Geshe Ma. Geshe is, of course, the scholar, monks of the Gelugpa tradition. Ma is feminine, Geshe Ma. So this interview was done with the first woman ever in the history of Tibetan Buddhism to achieve the formal title of a Geshe. And it was it is a German woman, not a Tibetan woman. A German woman, a nun, a German nun. That interview also very inspiring. As much as, like the style of the Gongchik is said, you don't need to study all these, all these debates and all of that, right? As much as, the general style of Mahamudra is, don't get into all these debates, all these esoteric, It's also good to appreciate, to see. And in her case, I will say that interview is to me, for me, an example of how someone who takes a different approach, which is the approach of really very disciplined analysis. And so she learned all the categories. And particularly she talked about how they studied. So mainly in the Gelugpa tradition, they study the 5 core texts of Indian Buddhism. The first of the 5 core texts is the Mahayana Sutra Lankara. This is why I'm talking about this. It's the Mahayana Sutra Lankara. Then the second core text they study is Madhyamaka text, Nagarjuna's texts. But the first main text they study is Mahayana Sutra Lankara. And the Mahayana Sutra Lankara is said to have the hidden meaning of the perfection of wisdom, whereas Madhyamaka texts have the explicit meaning of the perfection of wisdom. And what is the hidden meaning of the perfection of wisdom? The path, the practice. So Mahayana Sutra Lankara is a you can say, organized treatise, shastra, yeah? Organized shastra to bring together all the information found in the perfection of wisdom that relates to practice. Whereas the Madhyamaka text from Nagarjuna brings together the theory, the view. Yeah, so here, the quotes from Mahayana Sutra Lankara, you can see, how it's talking about, It doesn't talk much about the emptiness side. Of course it does, but it's mostly focused on, like statements like, be affectionate to the poor, be affectionate to the undisciplined, be affectionate to the quarrelsome, be affectionate to the mindless. It's all about developing these qualities. Mahayana Sutra Lankara. So this is so that, in case some of you decide, oh, I like to read some of these things, then look for Mahayana Sutra Lankara. Then Madhyamaka, like Nagarjuna's text, Chandakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara. But in the interview with the Geshe-ma, she talked about how now before studying that, before studying the 5 great texts, you spend a couple of years studying, preparing yourself. And there they start off with studying what's known as collected topics, which is basically a list of terms and their definition. Starting with like A, aggregates. What are aggregates? What are the definition of aggregates? What is covered under aggregates? What is not covered under aggregates? So they learn all of that. Maybe 70 different terms, So collected topics is learning the definition of terms. So often, when we study Dharma, we pick up a book, we just read. Then terms like compassion, terms like love, we just interpret it based on our own understanding of love and compassion, right? So then we might even have, a accurately translated text, but because our definition of terms may or may not match how these terms are being used, then we think, oh yes, I understand the Dharma. In fact, you just understand your own confusion. Yeah, so they spend first year. One area is definition of terms, called collected topics. Then they also learn what you can say is epistemology, which is the science of knowing how you know things. Knowing how you know things. How do we know something? What is the process of knowing something? So they're studying the mind, but not like Mahamudra mind, but this ordinarily, so they study like, what is valid perception, not mistaken, not confused? What is clear thinking? What is fuzzy thinking? All the different forms of fuzziness and what makes them fuzzy? So they also learn that. Then next they learn reasoning, how to reason. Logic. What is... because a lot of our confusions, right, our suffering arises from simply not knowing how we know things and knowing things incorrectly. So the next 2 topics are related to. So these are like reference point is the collected topics. Tools of how to know and how to reason are also taught. There's a fourth topic. I forgot offhand what the fourth topic is, but these take about a year to 2 years. You have to finish the textbooks for those. Then you are ready to read one of the 5 core texts, and you are taught that. That goes on. The 5 core texts. It says that I think 6 years for maybe the first text. Yeah, something like that. Mahayana Sutra Alankara. Or maybe including the second text. Yeah. The last 2 texts that are studied is Vinaya and Jatakas. I mentioned this before. Vinaya and Jatakas. The Jataka tales, you don't study that until year 14 or 15. That text is, she said that they spend maybe two years, I think, at the end of the program. You would study the discipline, the ins and out of the Vinaya Pratimoksha. So for monks, the fully ordained monks, the 253 rules and how the rules came about, and the different ways in which you compromise those rules of training and how do you repair them. All those you don't study until year 14, 15. And then before those 2, you study the Abhidharma Kosha. Now, normally in the West, we think Abhidharma Kosha is Hinayana, right? And you would think, oh, you start with the Hinayana, then you go to Mahayana, then you go to Vajrayana. No, that's not how the curriculum is. In fact, so the Geshe-ma actually addresses this. You listen to it, because the interviewer says, of course the interviewer, I know him, he knows why. He's a good interviewer, so he's getting the Geshe to address this. And he said, so Abhidharma, it's like you study this after you spend many years studying Nagarjuna and Maitreya and all of that. She said, yeah. She said, because the Abhidharma has a lot of seemingly contradictions. And she said that if you don't know how to sort out things, then if you're exposed to the Abhidharma too early, it will just cause a lot of confusion. So there's the notion of, not overexposed. These days, if a teacher says, no, don't read that, then it's a little dangerous. People will be, oh, you're controlling my thoughts, you're controlling my reading. People, and maybe the teacher is, who knows, that's the problem. But there is a reason, also where, out of concern for you, the teacher said, no, not yet, don't put that aside. This is the definition of working with someone to help us. Yeah, not even on the level of seeing the person as Buddha, but just on the level of I trust the coach, to kind of be a guide for what I should be exposed to and what I should not be exposed to at different points of the path. That is, I think, necessary. Yeah. So anyway, we have looked at the first statement of chapter 4. Any questions or comments?
I had a question based on the tangent that you went on.
Yes.
On the guru and the teacher. I think I've honestly been pretty confused about that for a while now. So sometimes when I'm meditating and I think about the guru, even though who comes to mind is Thich Nhat Hanh. Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, like his face or his image. but it's not like I'm his student or anything like that. But you said we can be receiving teachings by one person, the other one can be the one seen as the guru.
Uh-huh.
Would that, I mean, would that, would that work?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if it'll work or not. You have to see if it works or not, you know? Yeah, so if that's the question you're asking, you know, are you asking that or not?
I don't know. I've always had confusion because whenever it's like visualize the guru or imagine the guru, I sometimes I'm at a loss, right? So when I took refuge with Kempose Wang some years ago, it was like, I guess I have to visualize him, right? And then, and sometimes he comes to mind, and then I'm like, maybe I should visualize His Holiness
What do
now.
you mean by visualize?
Like think of the guru as the person who would be a living Buddha that I know now.
Well, there's always Buddha Shakyamuni.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you know.
No need to have a living reference in 2020.
Not no need. Yes, there is a need, but available or not is another issue, you know.
Okay.
Right? Available meaning, you know, not even like, you know, will he answer my phone call or not, you know. Available meaning, you know, is there connection or no connection, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there connection or no connection, you know. Yeah, so we have been looking at this, you know. Maybe, you know, you've if you go back to some of the, you know, now maybe 80 videos, you know, you'll see this theme, you know. And the theme here is like, you know, we're not talking about, you know, individuals. We're not talking about individuals. So whenever you hear, you know, visualize the guru as Buddha, then, you know, think of Buddha. Think of Buddha, you know, Buddha Shakyamuni. Yeah, think of Buddhas. Think of Buddha Shakyamuni. That's, you have to understand, you know, like the cultural reference is different. So we're translating literally, right, Tibetan text. For Tibetans, it's quite easy, you know, when you say to them, easy, not that, you know, the experience arises easily, easy as in they don't need to think, you know, like who is this, you know. Think of the Lama as Buddha, you know, and historically it's like, yeah, the Lama, you know, the Lama that I'm receiving teaching from, that is Buddha. Not very complicated for them. For us, it's really complicated. Then instead of getting lost in the complication, yeah, understand that what it is saying is that, you know, you have to trust that Buddhahood is real. And that reality is available. Not only available for you to praise and for you to worship and for you to make offerings to, but available for you to actualize. Another way of putting it will be like, if you listen to teachings by Gajien Rinpoche, he will say, you know, every single teacher that you take teachings from, that you listen to, you think of them as Buddha. Yeah, he says that. Then you don't need to go, oh, Should I think of this? Should I think of that? Should I think of this? Should I think of that? It's not to see the Buddha as your guru. It's to see your guru as Buddha. Those are not the same statement, you know. Yeah, if you do it the other way around, you know, to see Buddhas as your guru, then you're like, well, who is my guru? Well, today I think it's this one. Tomorrow I think it's that one. I think I want to go back to the first one now. No end to that. It's the other way around. See all sources of Dharma, especially as Buddha. Why? So that you can see all beings as Buddha. It's sort of, it's based on complete logic, right? If you cannot see someone who is giving you Dharma as Buddha, what are the chances that you're going to be able to see Donald Trump as Buddha? Absolutely no chance. Or Hillary Clinton, you know, maybe your politics is different from mine. Yeah. No chance, you know. You're going to be able to see. If you're Brazilian, yeah, Bolsonaro as Buddha. No chance. So then, by logical deduction, yeah, you have to be able to see, at the very least, how you're getting the Dharma, those as Buddha. Not because they are more Buddha, you know, than someone else. It's not based on a dualistic. So your dog is Buddha. That's easy to see, you know. Maybe your kid as Buddha, you know, there's situations that you like as Buddha, yeah, you know. Then in the less complicated world of, like, you know, old Tibet, the Lama as Buddha, in some ways it's also because the Lama is there, it's available there to potentially make life difficult for you. Potentially. So then that is a greater test. Then Buddha is the one that sits on the throne and doesn't move. We talked about this, yeah, already. So if you're not ready, then better. Buddha is the one that sits on the throne and, you know, lives up to your expectation of what Buddha is. Then Dalai Lama is a good candidate. Thich Nhat Hanh is a good candidate, you know, because they are, for all intents and purposes, you know, they're sitting on the throne and they don't talk back, you know. And then when you serve the Lama, you know, and then you get close enough, you know, that's when you go, oh, really? Why Buddha today like this, huh? I can tell you that and this is not because that person is not Buddha enough, but it's inevitably, there will be situations, yeah? Even if, like, you could wave a wand, suddenly you are Thich Nhat Hanh's attendant, I guarantee you, yeah, you'll go, well, why Buddha is like this today, you know? Yeah. So we start off with, you know, something that is safe to consider as Buddha, because it's not going to shake us up too much. But the point is to really keep working on until, you know, as the Mahayana Sutra Alankara says, you know, be affectionate, right? Be affectionate to the poor, be affectionate to the undisciplined, be affectionate to the quarrelsome, be affectionate to the mindless. Have compassion for those enthralled to sense objects. Have compassion for those attached to wrong views. Change this into the context of Buddha nature and training in purity, perception of purity. Yeah, you can change that quote. It becomes, right? See the undisciplined as Buddha. See the quarrelsome as Buddha. See the mindless as Buddha. See those enthralled by sense objects as Buddha. See those attached to wrong views as Buddha. Doesn't mean, like, therefore you should be enthralled in the sense objects. Therefore you should have wrong views. Therefore you should be mindless. Therefore you should be quarrelsome. No, it's saying, yeah, can you? And so, the example, like I said, there are good examples, of relatively, as far as we can tell, that they're unperturbed by the changes that is happening around them. That's because of the perception of purity. Yeah. There are individuals like that, settle evenly. They don't get rocked by the ups and the downs. They're not absent, in the interview with Shachir Rabjan Rinpoche, he said, like with his grandfather, continuously there's a stream of people coming to him, no matter how high or how low in their importance in the grand scheme of things. Everyone who came to see his grandfather felt like they were the most important person to his grandfather. But meanwhile, grandfather is unmoving. The Gongchik OCT, unmoving. And that's possible. That's possible to train. Changchu Sencho Rinpoche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge Gu Che Ge Ba Nyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du Be Wer Sho. One final thing, this Sunday, daylight saving ends. Translation, now it will be a little bit more challenging for our friends in Malaysia because the time is going to be 13 hours different. We're still going to start with North Carolina time from 9, which now means, like in Malaysia, is 10 p.m. So very understandable if some of you cannot stay the whole time. Then I don't know when Mexico starts the end of daylight savings. So, and Guatemala doesn't do daylight savings, I think. But just be aware of that time is changing. This Sunday morning is when time changes in the US. So on Monday, my 9 a.m. is going to be different from your usual time. So please check the time and see what it is for you. Yeah, so a reminder on that.
Thank you, Dr. Han.
Yeah.
Gracias.
Gracias. Feliz fin de semana.
Thank you.
Yes.